All right, so lesson 49. Okay, we'll talk about two things, the Good Shepherd and then also the merciful or Good Samaritan story. It's probably familiar, but let's first take a look about Jesus being the Good Shepherd. So John chapter 10, okay, and we'll read through the first few verses here and then continue on with that. So read first verses 1 through 11. So this is Jesus, okay, speaking to the Pharisees and those around him, those who are all listening. Verse 1 of John chapter 10. Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that entereth not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbeth up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he that entereth in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter openeth, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calleth his own sheep by name, and leadeth them out. And when he putteth forth his own sheep, he goeth before them, and the sheep will follow, for they know his voice. And a stranger will they not follow, but will flee from him, for they know not the voice of strangers. This parable spake Jesus unto them, but they understood not what things they were which he spake unto them. Then said Jesus unto them again, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved, and shall go in and out, and find pasture. The thief cometh not, but for to steal, and to kill, and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. Jesus is teaching here about sheep. We had Reverend Geikelar give a chapel speech on Psalm 23. He spoke quite a bit about sheep and a shepherd. Here's another book, A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23, written by a W. Philip Keller. The book he's unfortunately full of Arminianism. In other words, he believes that all men can be saved and that it's us who can make the decision about what we want to be God's children or not. But what it's really interesting is about how sheep live. He spent many years as a shepherd, and he looks at Psalm 23, and he speaks quite a bit about how sheep behave and how David, as a shepherd boy, was the perfect person to write Psalm 23. So it's a good book I would encourage you to write just to learn about being a shepherd, because you have a greater understanding and appreciation for what Jesus is talking about here. The more you know about sheep and how they behave from a real shepherd, it makes things much more plain. So fortunately, none of us are shepherds. We don't get that beautiful insight. But we can read a book from or written by a shepherd. So I would encourage you to do that. But anyways, let's take a look at what Jesus says here. Okay? So you've got a sheepfold, right? What are you imagining? Sheep in a pen, right? There's a fence around the outside to protect the sheep. And obviously, you would install, as a shepherd, you would install a gate that you could open and go in and out of the sheepfold. Now your fence is, well, how tall are you going to build your fence? What are you thinking when you're going to build this fence? What's going to determine the height of your fence? How high do you think you should build it? Kenton? Yeah, you just want to know, well, how high are sheep able to jump? How tall are they? That's about how high. I'll put my fence just a little bit higher than that. Keep the sheep out. Okay? So you build your sheepfold. But obviously, if we maybe build a fence that's, 3-4 feet tall, that's probably enough to keep the sheep in, keep them from jumping out. Are you able to climb in, Logan, do you think? Could you get over a 3-4 foot fence? Not electrical, right? Jump right over that fence. What other animals might be able to get in over that fence? It's only 4 feet tall. It keeps the sheep in, but it doesn't keep what other animals? Micah? Okay? Deer might jump in there. deer aren't going to do much to the sheep other than steal maybe their grass. Kenton? Okay, well, give me a type of predator. What's that? Mountain lion. Easily he's going to jump over that fence. Maybe a larger animal like a bear comes along and can knock it over. Okay? What animal does Jesus always speak about that we need to be careful that might come into the sheepfold faith? Okay, wolves. So our fences, when we build it, we're thinking about the sheep. We can keep the sheep in. Okay? So that's our sheepfold. We've got this area now that the sheep can go into each night. The only way that you can get in, at least the proper way to go in and out, is through the gate, through the doorway. Okay? And that person who enters in through the doorway is going to be the shepherd. Maybe in today's language you could say there's a code, a combination to get in. Only the shepherd has that combination to get in and out. He's not going to give it to a stranger. A stranger will have to jump over the fence. Okay, and animals aren't going to be able to put in a code. They're just going to jump over or break their way in. The porter openeth. Porter is a doorman. He stands there and he opens and closes the door. So this sheepfold doesn't just have the sheep of one shepherd in it, but it's probably a town has together built a large sheep pen to keep their sheep in at night. You set a watchman over that sheepfold during the night to keep an eye on it. And you have a porter, that man who guards, who only lets in the shepherd whose sheep are in here. He opens and closes that door. And so, here in the morning, you as the shepherd, you go down to the gate. The porter opens the door. You go into the sheepfold and you call out. Maybe you've got some type of call. And the sheep that are yours, immediately their heads perk up. And they see you. And they all make their way through the pen towards your direction. Because the sheep hear your voice, they know your voice, and they will follow you. So they come and they begin to follow you. Okay? And you go out of the pen then. The sheep all follow you out, and you lead them off into the pasture where they're going to be grazing that day. If another man comes in and he calls out to the sheep, they won't recognize his voice. They won't listen to him. They won't obey him. Okay? Instead, they'll flee from him. Jesus is making some pictures there. Obviously, who is the shepherd? Who is the shepherd here? Garrett? Yeah, Jesus is the shepherd. He calls his people. And they obey him. They follow him. Any other man comes and says that they are Christ, they won't know his voice. They shouldn't follow him. Okay? The only way to get in and out is through the door. Okay? Only the shepherd can open that door. So that's some of the pictures that Jesus is making there. Okay? The whole sheep pen, obviously full of all those sheep, is going to be the world. And the only sheep that listen to Jesus are Jesus' children, his called, his elect. The rest are the world. They don't come when he calls. They don't listen. Okay? So Jesus makes those pictures there. Verse 7, I am the door of the sheep. All that ever come in me are thieves and robbers. Anybody else who comes in, they would be Satan and his angels trying to steal away these sheep. Or the false teaching of the Pharisees trying to steal away God's people. They can't do it because they are Jesus' sheep. Okay? They don't hear them. So, Jesus says, I am come that they may have more life and have it abundantly. And then he shows exactly who he is and what his ultimate purpose in his coming is. And that is in verse 11. The good shepherd giveth his life for the sheep. What did David kill while he was protecting his sheep? When he was just a boy? Jennifer? A lion and a bear. A shepherd will do whatever it takes to protect his sheep. Okay? Because we have to remember back in the Bible days, wealth and riches wasn't counted by how large a check you got each week from your boss or how much money you had in the bank. But wealth was determined by the size of your herd. A large group of cattle with Think of Job or sheep or oxen, whatever it may be. And so this is your family's livelihood. If these sheep are all killed by one mountain lion who has a thirst for blood, going around and killing sheep after sheep after sheep for no reason, or a wolf, the livelihood of your family may be gone. And so a good shepherd will go and try to stop that lion or that bear or that wolf to keep them from destroying the family business and the wealth of that family. And that's what Jesus does for us. We would be destroyed. We would be ruined. We do deserve punishment in hell. But Jesus gave his life for us. He is the best shepherd, the ultimate example of a perfect shepherd. Okay? And then continuing on, verse 12 talks about some of the false guys. So false teachers or the Pharisees here, verse 12 of John 10. Follow along there, please. He that is an hireling and not the shepherd, whose own sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and know my sheep, and am known of mine. As the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep have I, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice. And there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life, that I may take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This commandment have I received of my Father. There was a division, therefore, among the Jews for these sayings, and many of them said, He hath the devil, and is mad. Why hear ye him? Others said, These are not the words of him that hath the devil. Can the devil open the eyes of the blind? So let's take a look through there, just those verses. Jesus teaches there in verse 12, and hireling. Sometimes you want to go on vacation, right? Or maybe you have something important to go to, maybe a family wedding. So the shepherd, rather than going out to the sheepfold that morning and calling his sheep and taking them out, he hires someone. Okay? And this hireling is able to gather up the sheep out of the sheepfold and takes them out to the pasture where they can graze. And sitting off in the trees or up in the boulders is a wolf that comes bounding down. And this hireling thinks, well, this is not my livelihood here. This isn't my family business. And I won't want to lose my life. And he takes off and he runs away and he leaves those sheep to die under the mercy of this wolf or mountain lion or whatever it may be that's attacking. Jesus says, that's like these Pharisees here and other leaders. They don't care about the sheep. They'll do whatever it takes to save themselves. It's all about themselves. I. Then Jesus says, down there in verse 16, I have other sheep which are not of this fold. So in that morning when the shepherd goes down to the sheepfold and calls out to them, Come sheep, and all of his sheep come and follow them. Like we said, there are many in the sheepfold that don't listen, don't hear his voice because they're not his sheep. Jesus goes and maybe a ways off there's another sheep pen. Obviously, the sheep that he first calls, who are they a picture of? The first sheep that are called. Garrett? More specifically, Kenton? The Jews. Very good, the Jews. So then Jesus will go off to another sheep pen where there's another mixture of sheep in there. He'll call out, Come sheep, and they hear his voice and they come. And obviously those are a picture of who? What group of people? Courtney? The Gentiles. Okay, they will be called too. The Gentiles. So all of his people are gathered together. They hear his voice and they know him. Okay. And then we see at the end there, the people are arguing amongst themselves. Who is this guy? His speech is very confusing to them. He's making these pictures and I don't understand one iota of it. Well, that's because God's Spirit isn't in them. They aren't able to understand. And so they don't quite get it. They don't understand. And they think he's got a devil in him. But then others argue, well, you may say he's had a devil, but he just, remember, he was able to heal the eyes of the blind and raise the dead and heal the sick. One who's able to do those things must not have a devil in them. All right, and then turn to Luke chapter 10. And we start at verse 25. The story of the Good Samaritan. All the Jews and the Pharisees, they're always trying to trick Jesus. Always trying to trick him. All right, verse 25 of Luke chapter 10. And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tempted him, saying, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? And he said unto him, What is written in the law? How readest thou? He answered, he said, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself. And he said unto him, Thou hast answered right. This do, and thou shalt live. So this lawyer is coming to he's setting Jesus up, as it were, here to get Jesus to agree with him. And now all of a sudden he's going to try to throw a stumbling block in front of Jesus. So he wants to know, what do I need to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus tells him, well, what does the Bible say? What does the law say? And he very eloquently gives that answer there. Okay, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and all thy mind, all thy strength, and then love thy neighbor as thyself. And we hear that each Sabbath day. And Jesus says, wow, you've answered right. Go do this. And now, trying to throw the stumbling block in front of Jesus, verse 29. And he, willing to justify himself, said unto Jesus, And who is my neighbor? Who do I have to be kind to? Hoping that Jesus will say something that maybe he can trip him up into. And then Jesus gives the story of the Good Samaritan here, verse 30. And Jesus answering said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment, and wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked on him, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and he went to him, bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence, and gave them to the host, and said unto him, Take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. Which now of these 3 thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And he said, He that showed mercy on him. Then said Jesus unto him, Go, and do thou likewise. So you have a Jew. He's traveling between Jerusalem and Jericho. The roads in the land of Canaan here, in Judea, are dry and dusty. It's a desert area, much like the southwest of the United States. You can imagine Arizona, New Mexico. And along the pathways, there'd often be tall piles of boulders and small hills, small little bits of brush along there, very dry, desolate area, sharp rocks. Okay? And it was dangerous to travel along these paths because here in these hills were perfect places for bands of robbers to hide. On the way, this man traveling by himself. And many wouldn't travel by themselves, but maybe he was in a hurry. Maybe he had to get somewhere to see something or to see someone. And so this Jew is traveling all by himself along the roadway. And down out of the hills comes this band of thieves and robbers. You can imagine the surprise on his face, the fear. Maybe he ran. Maybe he tried to convince them that he didn't have anything of any value along with him. But they didn't care. They had a thirst for blood. And so they begin. They strip off his raiment and take his clothes. They wound him. They probably beat him. Rocks they throw at him. Maybe sticks they hit him with, causing cuts and scrapes and bruises all over his body as it lays there. Whatever possessions he has, they take them with him. Maybe they think, well, you don't have any riches or money. Well, your clothing will be enough. Could use another set of clothes, and there they lay him, laying on the roadway, bloodied, beaten, unable to move, maybe even unconscious. There his naked body lays on the ground, the beating down of the sun, sapping what's probably left of his energy, barely breathing and bleeding. The robbers take off into the hills with whatever they've got. Later, on the pathway, maybe heading to Jerusalem, comes a priest, a man of God who should certainly have compassion on those who are weak, those who are feeble, those who need care. And this Levite sees the body laying in the roadway, and maybe he probably thinks, well, what's the time? I've got to get to Jerusalem. I've got important business to get to. This man, as he's getting closer, maybe slowing down, sees the body. Looks a bit lifeless over there. It's bruised and bloodied and naked. He doesn't want to deal with this man. He's got other work to do. He's a priest. He probably thinks in his mind, I've got godly work to do. Whereas this compassion that he could show would be the most godly work he could do. And so, what does he do to probably stay away from that body as much as possible, to clear his own guilt or to be afraid of any stench that may be there? And he sees it's a Jew, it's one of his brethren, but he doesn't want to deal with it. So he goes all the way to the other side of the road to get as far away from that body as he can. And maybe he can, in his mind, use an excuse later if he's questioned about it. Well, I didn't see him. I was on the other side of the road. I had my head in my scrolls or something. And he passes on. Next, a Levite, a worker in the temple. Again, one who is sanctified by God to work in the temple, to care for God's people. And he too should have compassion on this man. And he comes, and he slows down, and he sees the same thing. A body that's looking lifeless, that's battered and beaten and bloodied and dusty. And he comes and he takes a look. Sees it's a fellow Jew. But he too probably makes up an excuse in his mind to continue on his way. I've got work in the temple to do. The people will miss me there. I can't take time caring for this man. He looks half dead anyways. I probably would take him and he would die anyways. I'll just leave him here. Go along my way. I've got other work to do. He too passes by then on the other side. Finally, a third man comes, a Samaritan, one who hates Jews. But yet he has a heart and a soul that probably loves God. And he comes and he sees this battered and broken and bruised body bleeding there. He probably shakes the man to see if he comes to, and maybe the man lets out a low groan. Maybe not conscious, but the Samaritan can see he's breathing. He's got a pulse. And so he's been riding whatever animal he may have. Maybe he's got a donkey. Maybe he's got a horse. But he takes this man. He cares for him. He binds up his wounds. He takes out strips of cloth. Maybe even sacrifices his own shirt that he's wearing to tear it into strips. And he's got wine and oil with him. And he pours it onto the wounds to try to clean them out, get the dust and the dirt out. And binds up those wounds with the strips of cloth. Finally, maybe even pours a little water into the man's mouth or some wine to help him with his thirst. Whether the man is conscious or not yet, we don't know. But then he takes him and lays him on top of his animal. And he knows, I've got business to take care of, but this is more important business for me. And so he goes to the nearest nearby town. He gets to an inn. He lifts that man's body up off the animal. He carries it into the inn and goes to the innkeeper. I need a room for me and my friend here. I need to take care of him. I found him by the wayside, injured. So the innkeeper brings him to a room. Maybe it's a room with one bed, and the Samaritan lays the man down on the bed. Maybe he's more conscious now, gives him something to eat and to drink. Maybe once again cleanses his wounds. Maybe gives his whole body a complete wash to get the dust and the dirt and the filth out. Gets a pair of clothes. Maybe the innkeeper has a spare pair that he can purchase. Closes him and puts him into bed so that he can rest and begin to recover. The Good Samaritan stays with him there that night. The morning when he awakes, realizes this man is in no condition to travel. He has work to do. And so he makes an agreement with the innkeeper. He pays ahead. He pays money for the night and also far in advance and says, I need you to take care of this man. Make sure that he recovers. Give him food and drink each day until he's better, and then he can go upon his way. And I will come back through here later. And if the money that I've given you now isn't enough to care for him, for his stay, for the room, and for food and board, then I will pay you whatever else should be owed. Keep track of it. And so the Good Samaritan goes on his way. And then Jesus asks this lawyer, what do you think now? Which of these three was neighbor to this man who fell among the thieves? The lawyer must answer, well, it's the one that showed mercy. It doesn't matter if you're a Levite or a priest or whoever you are. Did you show mercy on your neighbor? Your neighbor is someone who is in your pathway that God puts before you. Maybe not on a footpath that we can think of or on a roadway. But anybody in your life that has troubles and difficulties in your life, will you help them? Mom and Dad are driving in a car maybe to downtown Madison. And you pull up behind a vehicle that's stalled in the road. Well, do you honk your horn and swerve and go off on your way? Or maybe God has placed these people in your pathway and you can get out and push them off to the side of the road. See if they need help. Yes, but we're going to be late. Doesn't matter. Can you help them? Can you assist them? Okay? You see the neighbor lady across the road. She's raking up her leaves. She's a widow. She's got beautiful trees, maple trees in her yards, and they've dropped bucket loads of leaves. You've got a basketball game you want to play with your brother or sister in the backyard to get to. Maybe you need to practice shooting your bow. Or you could cross the street and go help her rake her leaves. Right? God puts plenty of opportunities in our lives for us to help those around us, sometimes very small, not as big as what I spoke of. Picking up a book that they dropped because their arms are full. Holding open the door for someone to get in and out of church when they're older. Okay? Helping your brothers and sisters, your parents around the house. You see moms frantically trying to get the table set. And the pot of water boiling on the stove. Well, maybe you could offer to help. Hey, I'll set the table for you so you can make sure that it doesn't boil over. Little things. Or dad's out trying to wash the car. Well, you'd rather watch the football game on Saturday afternoon, or you could go out and help him. So many opportunities God gives us to help each other. Okay? And that's the point of Jesus' little story here. We have many opportunities to help others. Okay? In fact, even though there's so many ungodly people in the world today, the world still uses this story. The Good Samaritan laws, they're called. Okay? They do a couple of things. One, they can keep you from maybe getting in trouble if you saw somebody be injured. Let's say you saw a car accident. And so you stopped, you ran out to see if anybody needed help. Can I help you? Can I help you? And maybe that person is very injured and their engine is on fire. So you quickly open the door and you pull them out of the vehicle. And unknown to you, maybe they had a broken leg from the auto accident. And as you're dragging them out of the car so they don't burn to death or before it explodes, that broken leg, the bone inside the leg, severs a nerve to their leg because of the sharpness of the bone. Now they can't use that leg. In fact, the doctor is determined to amputate it. And that person says, if you would have just left me in my car, if you would have left me alone, maybe someone else, the paramedics could have got there and they would have helped me and not broken my leg and I'd still have it. I'm going to sue you for millions of dollars. There are laws that would protect you. You did that out of good faith. Your intention was not to hurt them, but to help them. Okay? They can protect you. But you also have, there are laws that are called Good Samaritan laws, that you have a duty. If you're driving down the road and you see that somebody needed help, let's say you saw a little kid walk out in the road, they got hit riding their bike and they got hit. You stop and help them, or you keep passing along your way and don't call for help? Boy, I don't want to do anything. I'd be afraid to call 911, or I don't know what to do. I'll just go along my merry way and maybe someone else will hopefully help them. Right? Well, you could get trouble that way as well. You should have stopped, and at the least, if you can't do anything, call 911. Get help on the way. Stay there so that you can tell the police what happened, what you saw. But I'm in a hurry. That's what we talked about in devotions this morning. It's all about I. And that's the problem with the priest and Levite. They didn't think about the body of Christ. They didn't think about their fellow believers and think, we, how can I help each other out? So that's the story there of the Good Samaritan. And also Jesus says the shepherd. So some good lessons for us there about how we can care for one another. Treat each other well. Remember, God's going to give you plenty of opportunities to help others in your life. See if we can do that. See if we can help others.